4th episode of the Fast Break Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Gotzi, and with me today I have two guests. My roommate, Tanner Dislin, to my right, and my friend, Keegan Turnbull, to my left. So in today's episode, we will be continuing our discussion of March Madness. In this episode, we'll be talking about the South region. And so, as a returning segment, the obscure player of the episode. In previous episodes, I've done NBA players, but with March Madness coming around, I'm doing obscure college basketball players. So in the previous episode, y'all have any guesses as a player from UConn?
I do.
Tanner.
And last episode I mentioned that I was more confident in this one than the one before because I got that one right too, in case we're and what did it in for me, obviously, is UConn, whatever, but the two championships did it. In 2011, I remember that team was led by Kemba, and I remember baby little Shabazz backing him up, and then 14 led his own team to the national title. Give me Shabazz.
Shabazz Napier
He's right.
is the answer. He's saying Kemba out here.
I say,
Number 13, Kemba Walker.
I don't remember
So in
Me too.
in this episode, we have a guy from Ohio State. He's a point guard, number 4. 2010 to 14. He's second Big Ten in 2013. Third team Big Ten in 2014. Big Ten tourney MVP in 2013. 2-time Big Ten Player of the Year in 2012, 2014. 4-time Big Ten All-Defensive Team.
Okay.
Big Ten All Freshman in 2011 and Big Ten Sixth Man in 2011. Y'all got any guesses?
Honestly, I think I might go 3 for 3. I got a decent guess
I-
here.
This guy's confident.
I think I got my first one.
There you go. All right. If you have any guesses, comment in the comment section below or tweet at us on Twitter. That link will also be in the description. And if you're trying to watch any of the previous episodes, I will leave those links also in the description. So let's get right into it. The number 1 seed in the Southern region is the Baylor Bears. So let's hop right into it. Baylor, Hartford, who y'all got?
The Bears.
Yep.
Baylor.
All right, clean sweep by the Bears right there. Next, we have the classic 8-9 flip a coin matchup. North Carolina, Wisconsin. Who y'all got there?
And a particularly good one, I think. I think this is
I think
easily my favorite. Going to be my favorite to watch. I went back and forth a lot, but I think I'm going with the Heels. I think they just got too much size.
Yep. For that reason, I went with Tar Heels as well.
This was, like we said, incredibly difficult game. Looking forward to watch it. I got the gutsy, gritty, sometimes dirty Wisconsin Badgers.
The gritty and gutty Wisconsin Badgers, sometimes dirty Matt Davis.
I mean, he ain't wrong. You didn't have to say it. But
All right, next we have Villanova Winthrop. Who y'all got there?
this, we'll talk about this later, a little more in detail. But quite possibly the toughest matchup in this one for me. Villanova without their starting point guard. They lost him a few weeks ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cargo Gillespie.
It's going to be really difficult for Villanova to overcome that. But I do believe that they'll have just enough to push them over the top, over the 12 seed Winthrop.
And I'm going to go the other way, actually. I think this is maybe one of the double-digit upset that I predicted that I'm most confident in. We mentioned without Gillespie, their best player, they've kind of been a shell of himself, not playing good ball recently. And Winthrop had a fantastic season. I'm going with the Eagles.
Eagles as well for me. Like we said, Card Gillespie being out really hurts the team. He's kind of their team leader, and I think that will not benefit them in March Madness. That's why I'm going with Winthrop. Next matchup, we have Purdue, North Texas. Who y'all got there?
Yeah. Purdue does move on.
Yep,
I got the Boilermakers playing really good basketball down the stretch.
All right, next matchup, we got Texas Tech, Utah State.
Incredibly difficult matchup between these two teams. And Texas Tech is going to be a very formidable team for anyone they face. But I like the defensive intensity of Utah State. I think that they're going to turn them over, and I think that they're going to give Texas Tech more than they can handle. I think Texas Tech is looking forward. I don't think they're looking at their opponent. Utah State knocks off Texas Tech.
Going with the Aggies. Wow.
I'm not. I think Texas Tech will get it done.
Yeah, I like Texas Tech in this one, especially with how well Mac McClung has been playing for the Red Raiders, I think.
Yeah. Texas Tech is a fantastic team. I just think they're going to be looking at their next game more than they're looking at Utah State.
A little bit of a trap.
Yeah.
Next matchup, we have Arkansas and Colgate. I think I got there.
I kind of mentioned it already. They're going to be looking at their next game. And that would be in reference to Arkansas. They're moving past the toothpaste.
I have Arkansas as well.
I have Arkansas too, but do not sleep on the Raiders of Colgate. They can score points, and so can Arkansas. Not a lot of defense to be played. Get ready to watch a track meet. First one to 100 wins, but I think that's the Hogs.
The thing about everyone has been saying this is a matchup to watch out for, but if you look at Colgate, they have played five teams this season, and I think just Arkansas being in better competition, like we said in previous episodes, I think they get it done. But it's going to be a track meet. It's going to be fun to watch. Next, we got Florida, Virginia Tech. Who y'all got there?
Well, I didn't really know. I don't really like the way. I don't really like either team all that much. Next round matchup against Ohio State or Oral Roberts. So I think it's a quick exit for whoever wins here, but I'm gonna roll with Virginia Tech. I got the Hokies. Tennessee.
I kind of defaulted to just picking the higher seed here because despite doing research on both these teams, I really don't like either of them too much. I'm gonna go with the 7 seed. The 7 seed wins more often than the 10 in this matchup. So I'm gonna roll with that percentage.
Yeah, I went with Florida as well. I think they are a better team than their record shows. They have a stud in Trey Mann. The loss of Keontae Johnson obviously hurt them. I think they got a little motivation with him being out, but
Incredibly weird game. Small sample size, 23 games and 21 games. Hard one to predict.
As you already decided who's going to win this game, Ohio State or Robert.
This may shock you, but I got the Buckeyes.
I like that.
And that's a clean sweep. All right, out of all those first round matchups, which did y'all struggle most with?
I mentioned this earlier. For me, it was, and I know that you mentioned that this, Tanner, this was your most favorite double digit over, to move past the first round. For me, one of the reasons why taking Villanova over Winthrop was incredibly difficult was just, I had to go against my gut. A team that doesn't have their starting point guard, that has been struggling down the stretch in their absence. My mind says take Winthrop, but I just don't know if I can have Villanova, a team that has so regularly gone deep into tournaments, to just not make it past the first round. If you look at different websites, CBS Sports, ESPN, any website that has where you fill out brackets, if it shows the percentages, I know off of CBS Sports, for instance, Winthrop has more of the picks than Villanova, which is incredibly uncharacteristic for the 5-12 matchup. It may change by the time this episode comes out, but as of today, earlier today, that was the case. But for me, like I said, I just find it incredibly difficult for Villanova to not make it past the first round.
Yeah, and one thing I mentioned how I like the Eagles in that one, but if Villanova wins, it's because Jay Wright, that man is coach.
Yeah,
Anyway. Looking at mine, other than Florida, Virginia Tech, which we kind of talked about, a little weird there, but I think that's a quick exit. So the game that carries some weight for me, we talked about it a little bit before, and that would be Arkansas Colgate, just because the more secure way of play when you're going to a neutral site is defense, and neither of these teams do that. So, the offensive prowess is going to be on display here, and offense sometimes has trouble traveling. So I think it could be very possible that Arkansas might shoot poorly, and Colgate doesn't. But I still lean the Hogs, but that would be my most difficult.
Yeah. North Carolina, Wisconsin's had to be the most difficult for me. Honestly, I flipped the coin and it was North Carolina, so that's what I went with. I also like North Carolina's matchup against the Baylor Bears in the next round. But yeah, so that's why I picked North Carolina. In-depth analysis right there. Now on to the second round. Baylor, UNC, or Baylor, UNC, or Wisconsin, who you got?
I have Baylor and Wisconsin in this particular matchup. And in the last 6 tournaments, 4 out of the 6 times there has been a number 1 seed that has not made it into the Sweet 16. In 2018, there were 2 of them. 2019, there was 1. In 2021, I'll have at least 1, with Wisconsin beating Baylor. Wisconsin's a team that's going to give you a difficult time. They bring defense to the floor. We talked already a little bit about how defense is something that travels no matter what. All you need is intensity, and Wisconsin has no shortage of that. When you're relying on high-flying offense, we'll just have to wait and see. Like we said a lot in the last few episodes, it's March, anything can happen. I think Wisconsin hit some shots that they don't normally hit as well. Wisconsin's going to be bigger in the moment. Wisconsin over Baylor.
Wow. It's March, baby. I got Baylor, UNC, and I think this is a very difficult matchup for Baylor. Baylor lacks size. UNC does not. They have plenty of it. But Baylor has the best backcourt in college basketball. UNC kind of struggles there. I think the backcourt, the shooting, carry Baylor on to the Sweet 16.
Yep, I have Baylor against UNC as well, and I think Baylor gets done, like you said, best backcourt in the nation. A little more info on why I didn't choose Wisconsin and UNC. I think Trice is Wisconsin's best player. I think he is one of the most misused players, and that's why I also went with UNC. But next one, we have either Villanova, Winthrop, or Purdue. We got out there.
I got Purdue, Winthrop, and Purdue's a better team, and they are playing fantastic basketball. I mentioned this earlier. Very, very, very good down the stretch. Took Ohio State to overtime, who then took Illinois to overtime. I got Purdue here comfortably.
Yeah, I got Boilermakers big.
I have Boilermakers big over Nova. If Nova can make it, they're not going to win 2 games in a row, especially over the much better Purdue.
Next one, Texas Tech or Utah State versus Arkansas. Who you got there?
In this particular matchup, I have Arkansas and Utah State. We missed out on a great matchup in this particular situation between Texas Tech and Arkansas. But with the loss of Texas Tech in this particular matchup, Arkansas moves on rather easily.
Yeah, so I had Texas Tech, Arkansas. This was a tough one for me. Being from Arkansas, it's kind of hard. But I went back and forth. This was one of the most difficult for me in the entire tournament, honestly. But I'm going to go Hogs.
Yeah, I had Texas Tech, Arkansas, and exactly what Sam said. In fact, I'm going to take it a step further. I think it was the most difficult game for me to pick in the tournament. And with that, I'm going with Texas Tech. I think in order to beat Colgate, Arkansas is going to need to shoot the ball well, which I think they will. But I think that runs out against Texas Tech, a little bit better defensive team. Matt McClung carries the Red Raiders on the Sweet 16.
And then we got either Florida, Virginia Tech versus Ohio State.
In this one, I have Ohio State. They took one of the best teams in after beating a difficult Purdue team in overtime, as was previously stated. But took one of the best teams, if not probably, I would say the second best team in the nation at Illinois in overtime. Had chances to knock them off, couldn't quite do it. They move on to the Sweet 16 quite handily.
Yep, I got the Buckeyes in that one as well, but I got them against Florida. but like you said, they took Illinois to overtime. They proved how good they are.
Yep, I got Virginia Tech in that 7-10, but Ohio State wins comfortably.
So we kind of already touched on it, but who is y'all's biggest, like, most difficult to pick in the second round?
Texas Tech, Arkansas for me, for the reasons we talked about.
Yeah, same.
And I talked about this a little bit already as well, of Baylor and Wisconsin. Regardless of who comes out of North Carolina and Wisconsin, I think Baylor's going to have an incredibly difficult time. But up against Wisconsin, more often than not, Wisconsin's not an easy win. If Baylor does move on, in which they very well could, they're a talented team. If they do move on, it comes in a close one. Because Wisconsin's not going to let anyone go easily, especially when it could be their last game of the year. So they're going to bring all the energy they have.
Yeah, absolutely. So who y'all got in the Sweet 16 and who you got advancing to Elite 8? So yeah, it's either Baylor or Wisconsin and Purdue. Who y'all got?
I mentioned before how Texas Tech, Arkansas was my number one hardest to pick. This one, the Baylor Purdue, is my number 3 hardest to pick. For the same reasons with UNC, but better. Purdue has the size, but better. Purdue has a better backcourt, but it's not Davion Mitchell and it's not Jared Butler, and I'm rolling with Baylor. Maybe in overtime, very slight margin. Keegan?
I'll have Purdue over Wisconsin in this one.
I have Baylor, Purdue, and I have Purdue upsetting Baylor for the opposite reasons. I think the height of Purdue is going to get to Baylor. Going off of Baylor's, if the top seeds win, they have to face UNC, who also has a lot of height and is going to beat up the Bears. I think Purdue is just going to get them at the right time and they pull off the upset.
That's it. If Purdue beats Baylor, it's in the paint for sure.
And next, who y'all got in that matchup?
So I have Ohio State, Texas Tech, and Ohio State's playing too well right now. I think they handle the Red Raiders.
And in this particular matchup, I have Arkansas and Ohio State. This is going to be an incredibly difficult matchup for both of these teams, just from the standpoint that if these teams can come in firing on all cylinders, it's really going to be a flip of a coin as to who's going to win. Both of these teams like to play fast. Both of these teams like to score. In this particular matchup, I will have Arkansas over Ohio State in this one. I don't know if Ohio State has just yet proven that they can top the best teams in crunch time. I know they beat Purdue in overtime. Arkansas is just a step higher than that. I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State takes them, but in this one, I have Arkansas.
Yeah, I have Arkansas, Ohio State as well. And I actually have Arkansas. I think Moses Moody is one of the best players in college basketball. Predicted lottery pick. I think he's going to shine bright in these big games of Arkansas, and I think Arkansas upsets Ohio State in that one. So moving on to the Elite Eight, who y'all got in your matchup and who y'all got advancing to the Final Four?
In this particular matchup, I would have Purdue and Arkansas, and this would be much watched television. All Elite Eight games will be, but this one in particular, for how much these teams are going to score, a lot of scoring in this particular region, as we've begun to talk about it unfold through the whole thing. I will have Arkansas moving on to the Final Four.
And I have Baylor, Ohio State. And I mentioned Baylor, Purdue was my 3rd most difficult. That's because Baylor, Ohio State is my 2nd most difficult. Again, probably the one I debated the longest. Even now, I still look at it and second guess myself, but I'm rolling with my studs. I think Baylor goes to the Final Four.
Yeah, I have Purdue and Arkansas as well. I actually have Arkansas advancing to the Final Four. I think Arkansas has one of the tougher roads in the entire March Madness to get to this point. But I think if they beat Ohio State, I think they can beat damn near anyone. So I got the Hogs in the Final Four. So I forgot to ask y'all, Sweet 16 and Elite 8, who out of those games, what was the most difficult matchup? We kind of already touched on it, but
So the Sweet 16 for me is by far Baylor Purdue. I debated it an incredibly long time, and I'm still not. I still, I mentioned this about some of my other picks I've had. I still think, well, Purdue might just destroy the paint, but I'm sticking with Baylor. But like I said, it was just an incredibly hard game to pick.
I said some of the same things about Ohio State and Arkansas, about how you really could go back and forth on it. In any given night, if you played it back to back here, each team would probably take one.
Yeah.
Problem is that only one chance, only one game. And I think more often than not, I think Arkansas will beat Ohio State.
yeah, I honestly think these are both incredibly tough games to choose. But for reasons as you saying, Purdue could potentially just beat Baylor in the paint, but you also have to consider Baylor has the best backcourt. So that's that decision, but I think Purdue's going to pull it off. And then Arkansas, Ohio State, you were talking about, and this is a tough region, and I think it's one of the most difficult regions for me. But I have Arkansas coming out on top. Now, who is kind of the most likely to make a deep run out of this region that's not expected to?
A couple off the top of my mind. I know Purdue's a 4 seed, which it's hard to call a 4 seed, kind of under the radar. But the only reason they're a 4 seed is because they got off to a rough start, and they've really started to figure things out, as we mentioned a couple times here, playing good basketball. But if you don't count them as a under the radar, I would go with the winner of UNC Wisconsin, which I have to be UNC. UNC's always had size, and layups and dunks in the paint travel better than 3-point shots, and they're more consistent. So I think UNC, if they get past Baylor, they can do something.
I think both of those teams, like you said, it's hard to call Purdue someone as a 4 seed to keep your eye on, but when you have some of the high-flying teams, the prolific offenses in the Big Ten, Purdue's not one that's often thought about. They're not. It's not something about them that's incredibly flashy compared to Ayo Dosunmu, compared to Luka Garza, compared to everything that Ohio State brings to the table. But I'm going to go the route of someone who's much lower than that of Colgate. The reason why I think that they can make a run, Tanner was talking about this at the beginning, about how they score a lot. Defense travels always, offense travels sometimes. If sometimes happens here for Colgate, Arkansas could be in trouble. Anyone in the South could be in trouble. One of the issues with Colgate is the fact that they've only played 15 games. The one loss that they had is when they scored the second lowest all season. And in that one loss, they scored 75 points. There's only one game lower where they scored less of an amount. That was 74. The lowest they scored all season was 74. They scored in the hundreds a handful of times, and once again, a handful of times, even coming in just 15 games. In the first 200 matchup between Arkansas and Colgate, like you said, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But when a team is lowest in the 70s, it's going to be really hard to outscore them.
And I just like to add one more thing that he said. He said, defense travels always, offense travels sometimes, but offense beats defense. Good offense beats good defense always.
I'm gonna actually one up you, Tanner. I think Arkansas is kind of flying under people's radar. They had, before to end the regular season, they won 11 straight. playing really good basketball. They dropped against LSU, but when they're hitting. I just think it's either they get upset in the first round or they make the Final Four. Because I think they're going to get, if they can get hot, they can get really hot. They got good bench players. I mean, Moses Moody, as I previously mentioned, is a freaking stud. So it'll be interesting. I think this region's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Live scoring. It's going to be a wild one. Y'all have any more comments on the South region?
It's a brutal road for Baylor, and it's a brutal road for Arkansas. I just know those are two of the teams we had in our Final Four. And whoever makes out of this bracket will be battle tested, or this region will be battle tested. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Keaton, got anything?
I don't have anything more to say. This is going to be a region to watch out for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all we have for today's episode. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends. Thanks for tuning into this episode. We hope to see you next time. Thanks.